You're listening to The Deep End. Today, we're joined by Dr. Arun Gosain, Division Head of Plastic Surgery at Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago and Professor of Surgery at Northwestern University. A leader in pediatric plastic surgery, Dr. Gosain is widely recognized for his expertise in craniofacial and vascular anomalies, congenital nevi, and cleft lip and palate repair. He has shaped the field not only through his surgical innovations, but through his leadership as past president of the Plastic Surgery Foundation, president elect of the American Association of Plastic Surgeons, chair of the American Board of Plastic Surgery, and president of the American Council of Academic Plastic Surgeons. In this episode, Dr. Gosain takes us through his career, from running a cutting edge craniofacial research lab at Lurie Children's to mentoring the next generation of plastic surgeons and providing life changing surgical care to children in underserved communities across the world. Let's dive in.
One of the things that, there's so many important topics of academic plastic surgery and just plastic surgery in general, and you are the perfect person to talk to. And it's again a very true honor to have you on, not only for all of your leadership roles, including the association, such a prestigious and historic society, um, but also your role as a mentor to so many. And I've come across a lot of your mentees, and they all speak so highly of you. And it's taught me a lot as a mentor myself. Um, Briefly, what do you think as a child kind of molded you into who you are today? Like any past experiences or childhood parents, et cetera, growing up that molded you who you are today?
Yeah, well, I don't know if either of you were families of immigrants. I don't say what was your back.
Yes,
Yeah, so
Lebanese.
yeah, so you'll have a similar. Were your parents? I'm assuming were born in Lebanon, right?
Yeah, and I was too.
Yeah, and you came. At what age did you come?
Three, I moved to London and then to the States.
Yeah, so
So,
it's a very similar story. Of course, my parents and I were all born in India. We came when I was 2 years old. The in those days, not a lot of immigrants were permitted. It was very selective. So my father had to really work hard to get here, and in fact, to get me here because it was so expensive, they brought me right before my second birthday because as soon as your second birthday hits, you have to pay airfare. So that was the
yes.
incentive to get me here at that time. So I celebrated my second birthday here, but the I think that really is what molded me is that early growing up with parents who are not familiar with the culture here and trying to assimilate into the culture through your friends while still respecting the culture that they understood. And I'm sure you have that same sense. That tends to mold you into being sensitive to the culture you came from and sometimes being a little bit of an outsider in the culture that you're being adapted into. But that really is what molded my early personality and always feeling a little bit different from those around me and trying to demonstrate or behave in a way that would be functional for them. My dad was an engineer, so when I was in second grade, we started moving, and we moved, I think, to 5 places between second grade and fourth grade
Wow.
because the engineering, once a project was done, then they shifted you another place. So that's how it was for my dad. And so I never was in one school for very long. And in fact, that makes it's hard to go to a new school and do well because you don't know what they're doing or what they've been taught. So I actually didn't do very well in th third grade because you have so many different factions. So the question was, was I dumb or not? And then and that's what, so the question was, everybody asked that question. So then they took an IQ test and said, no, he's not dumb. There's something they're not doing properly. So, so then that gave everyone confidence that one day I'd pick up. And it wasn't until we settled down when I was around fifth grade that I was able to get a sense of feeling like I was part of a community because we'd moved there at the beginning of my fifth grade year in California. And then from that point on, as I felt like I could get my feet on the ground, I was able to continue to perform better.
Yeah. And then what do you think, like, That all makes a lot of sense to me. What do you think, in your many different leadership roles, has helped you fill those roles? Like me knowing you kind of peripherally, like I wouldn't say that, a lot of people seek leadership roles. Others, they just work and it comes to them. What do you think kind of has allowed you to fill a lot of those positions?
Well, I think there are two things. One is following up on, whenever you're in a position, trying to identify what are the things that are lacking in that position. Because a lot, as you say, a lot of people go through these leadership roles, and so when you're a position and they take it and they just want the honor of having been in the role, but the organization is not impacted. And so if we
Yes.
look at a lot of our national organizations, they really are in quite a bit of disarray, whether we like that structure or not, because everyone wants these one-year leadership roles
Mhm.
that it leaves the program in significant disarray because the continuity of thought and progress is often stifled. So what I've tried to do in each of those roles is really look at where we can make that organization more efficient. And if you can leave some kind of one or two things where you've improved the efficiency significantly, then that will be that will be something that people can build on. For example, it was 20 some years ago that I was president of the PSRC, but the person who
Mhm.
was going to follow me was Andy Lee. Uh,
Mhm.
so so we did I did everything. I tried to organize as well as I could, and they said, Andy, okay, it's your time to take over. He said, well, there's no work left to be done. You've done everything. So being able to do that for someone as great an organizer and administrator as Andy Lee is something that gives you some satisfaction.
No, absolutely. What a person. Yeah, I agree. Um, what were you gonna
Yeah,
say, Hank?
just to take a step back a little bit, where along your journey did you decide plastic surgery? And, was there an instance or a memory, or did it kind of, you know, slowly develop that you realized you wanted to become a plastic surgeon?
No, I was when I was in high school, and when I would just read about different things, I read about John Converse, and it was just
Yes.
in Reader's Digest about how he had impacted the lives of children who otherwise apparently would not have had much chance in society. And then it put me back to my own journey because really, any of these detriments that I thought, because I was different from the others, even though I didn't have a craniofacial deficit. I felt the difference and I was smaller than the others. And so all of these things people could perceive as these are things that would limit your ability to get anything done. And so I felt like I could relate to that group of children, and
Mhm.
say, okay, maybe if we can take the things that they have as deformities and correct them and give them a chance in society, that would be something worth pursuing. And so I got that inspiration from John Converse. And then when I was in college and medical school, I got to visit with Dr. McCarthy, and that experience. In our days, I think mentorship was much more important. And I think what I really appreciate about Saeed is he also has that same strong sense of the value of mentorship. But if you look at a lot of our young people today, mentorship is less important to them, and lifestyle is more important. So that's been a little bit of a shift, but I think our long-term leaders, and I know that Saeed is going to be one, our long-term leaders really
100%.
do value that mentorship and the history of mentorship. And so that connection I had with Dr. McCarthy from early in my career, building on what I'd heard from Dr. Converse, made me feel that that was what I'd like to emulate if I could during my career.
Yeah, you know, the thing about mentorship is I think you can teach it. I think you can talk about what makes a good, and by thank you very much for your kind words, by the way. I don't know how much of that's going to be true about me, but I'll try. But for mentorship, like you can teach some things. You can teach, what should you do as a mentor? What should you do as a mentee to build a good mentor-mentee relationship? But I feel like mentorship just comes from just being a good person. You just want to help others. You want to be there for others. Like I get emails from undergrad students, medical students, and it's overwhelming, to be honest with you on top. So how do you manage it all? Like and I'm not just saying this on a podcast and in front of you, but you are the role model mentor, but it can be overwhelming. So how do you do it?
Yeah, well, I think it again comes out of your personal experiences. As we went through our training and you look at how you connected with mentors and perhaps areas where mentors could have helped you where we didn't have them, those are experiences that you'd like to somehow rectify.
Yes.
So there are so many times, and in our time, we didn't have the integrated program, so we went to general surgery, then
Hmm.
plastic. So and then in our general surgery, of course, we had our lab years. I didn't really, they just pretty much assigned me to wherever they felt would be the most beneficial to them, not really looking to how it could benefit my career. So I, in my first 6 months in the lab, I really floundered. And then but that was a very positive experience because I then realized that that if someone could have taken that person and given them a sense of inspiration and direction, then research could become a part of their careers. So somehow research became a part of my career even without floundering. But because I then found Dr. Mathis and Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Hunt, who was at UCSF, and they got me jump started in a much better direction. But unless you find those people who you can take and they can guide you, research can become is a nuisance and not a positive part of your experience. And so really where I feel that I can contribute is getting the young people to appreciate that research experiences, if in a positive environment with supportive people and a lot of positive feedback, can become a lifelong career. And I think that our field in plastic surgery is really a field of innovation, and we don't need to know. Someone who's innovating doesn't need to have a history of plastic surgery. They can be a new person who's never heard about any of these things and say, well, is this really the best thing, or what's wrong with this model? And so that's where students are so good, because these students are very bright. They got into medical school. They're the top of whatever groups they're in. And to really cultivate those minds and not have them biased by so many facts and in-service exams. I hate in-service exams because the problem with
Yeah.
in-service exams, they so much rely on what a person tells you you're supposed to know. And how do we know anything? Anything we do can be, we can find out there's a better way to do it in 5 years. So I don't like it when people say this is the answer to any question. And that's how I really work with my people in the lab. I say, we don't have the answer to any question. Any question you ask me is valid. And then let's look at what's been done. Is there something we can contribute, and then go from there? And that's what makes our research experience so meaningful to me. And the ability to capture and innovate these young people is something that I take pride in.
Yeah, something that I find, almost a little sad in a way is that plastic surgery has become so competitive and it's almost like an arms race. And admittedly, I don't think I could get in if I was applying now. And I'd have to go through some long roundabout way to do it and I would become it. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is this arms race now towards medical students and doing research. And I'm afraid that we're forcing research upon medical students without teaching them the love for research, the basics of it, and falling in love with science or falling in love with a clinical project because everyone wants 20 to 30 to 50 to 100 publications to get into plastic surgery. And one thing that I want to look at is a lot of those medical students then probably don't ever go on to do research the rest of their lives because when you're forced to do something, oftentimes you can't really fall in love with it. And so, what's your take on this whole pressure to do a research year off? And I think we need to find a way to build love for research rather than this arms race of publications.
Yes, I agree with that. And so it's a two-edged sword. I think if there weren't for that pressure that these students feel to spend some time in research, I probably wouldn't get to know them. But
Yeah.
once they are with me, then I completely divorce them from that arms race. I say that it really doesn't, I don't really care about your background. I don't really care about what you produce. What I care about is how much you contribute to our questions and discussions about innovation, and then eventually that'll lead to publications. But I personally don't think, they always say about numbers of publications. I really think that when you go back to the AAPS data, it's the people who are getting in are really might have just, if you subtract all the abstracts and all the nonsense, maybe three good publications, and that is really what they should focus on. And that's what try to get my people to focus on. And all of the presentations they make, the published abstracts, I really don't care about it. I tell them it doesn't matter what you've presented. You've got to get that publication through. And then before we even start a project, I tell them, what is the impact that this project is going to have? Is it just to get something published, or is it going to have
Yes.
impact? And then I say, well, let's review the literature before we talk about this again. And is this really going to add to what we know? And so to make them feel like they are contributing and not just in a publication mill. So I agree that the double-edged sword is that they may not have ever chosen to work with me had it not been for that pressure. But the positive end of that sword is that you can teach them that this is something that is really something they can develop a passion for, independent of the requirements of admission. And several of my students have not gone into plastic surgery, and those are some of the most grateful ones I've had. I had one who's going into psychiatry, but she was very productive in the lab. And when it came to her hooding ceremony at the end of the year, even though she knew she was going into psychiatry, and normally your parents hood you, she asked me to do it. So it's that compassion and that inspiration, independent of getting into a field that I pride myself in. And that's what I think our students really can reflect on. In fact, at the AAPS meeting, they're going to have a panel on medical students in the lab, and I'm going to just give a series of interviews of students who went through to demonstrate that it's not that their satisfaction is not the fact that they're in a treadmill, but rather their satisfaction is the fact that they've gained a mentorship experience and a love for what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's important to have a mentor like you that understands that.
Along the same vein, I'm just curious about your feelings in ter of USMLE going to pass fail.
Yeah.
You know, feelings
Yeah,
about
I
that.
think certainly we all look for objective data, and the as one goes to pass fail, and then go to step two, then people spend more time studying.
Exactly.
So that's what it is. But I think in the end, and we had this same question with the association, is how do we choose who's going to get into the association? And it's the exact same thing. We've been using all these numbers similar to what we do for medical students, and based on if you did so many publications, you get this number, and if you did so many presentations, you get this number. But those numbers often overlook things like someone who spent a lot of time in the community, or someone who might have spent a lot of time just getting something going in their medical school. So we're trying to revamp that whole process, and that's one of the things I'd like to do as president of the association, is revamp the process to say these are categories, but have a more subjective understanding of, did that individual participate in this category, rather than giving them a score. Because the way we do it now, much like we do for our medical students and ranking them by USMLE scores, is you get a score, and then basically the top scores get into the association, but you don't know where those numbers came from. And just because someone got 100 for publications and zero for community service, they may not be more of a contributor than someone who got 10 for community service and four for publications. So that's what I want to try to see if we can restructure, starting from our most prestigious organization. But I think that same concept should go backwards to who comes into medical school. And who comes into residency, because our criteria right now are so arbitrary, and they don't reflect on who's going to be a good surgeon.
Yes.
I would agree, yeah. But it's you need to take a little bit of everything and kind of see the full picture. And I think it does make sense, the to make step two a little bit count more than step one, just because it's more clinically relevant if you were going to pick between the two. And it's also, step one you take before you even really go on rotation. So once you take step two, it's kind of, you're more of a doctor in a sense, or closer to becoming a doctor, because you kind of now have exposure to the clinical aspect of things, and it's a shame to, um, box certain applicants out before they even step foot in an OR, or even before they step foot in a clinical setting.
Right. Yeah, I'm so far removed from the USMLE that I don't remember what they test, but what you're saying is true, then I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the whole concept or the whole thought process of how do you choose the perfect trainee and predict who will be successful in whatever meaning of success that is for that individual person is so important, especially heading into interviews this weekend. We have integrated interviews this weekend, and when I work with the residents every day, I'm just like so honored to have the chance to work with them and so impressed by the selection process because clearly like working with Hank and others, I'm like they're so wonderful. So clearly between all of your leadership roles and all the different societies, we're doing something right in plastic surgery because the future's bright from the people that I'm interacting with. Um, I want to ask you about talking about training programs. I'm a product of the independent track. And part of that was I was interested in surgical oncology, also pediatric surgery, but that was the way of the past when I was applying. What's your take on the independent versus integrated now and in the future? And then the future of training, is it competency-based training or what is your take on all of that?
Yeah, well, I think whether we like it or not, we know that the independent tracks are beginning to wane, and the integrated are increasing. We can see that by looking at the annual data. And so so even though I like the independent track for people who well, of course, all of our leaders, our senior leaders, went through the independent track because that was the primary thing. But look at a person like Michael Longacre. He really was not interested in plastic surgery until after he finished his research years
Mhm.
and started the fetal wound healing research, and then decided that wound healing and plastic surgery might be a good link. And so many people, John Siebert was going to be cardiovascular surgery, and through the Mass General, it wasn't until his later years with Jim May that he decided that he should look at plastic surgery and became a microvascular surgeon. So many of those people, I think even if they'd have had the integrated track in those days, we might have lost people like John Siebert and Michael Longacre because they would not have applied in the
Yeah.
integrated. And my good friend Charlie Thorne, who is a classmate of
Hmm.
mine, I remember when we were finishing, he wanted to be a vascular surgeon. So, and he also went to the Mass General. Fortunately, he and John Siebert paired up and became good friends, and both chose to go into plastic surgery. And they both made huge contributions. So that type of person we would have lost in the integrated program. We still would have had an independent track, but if that independent track wanes, we may lose them over time regardless. So my feeling is we need to make a concerted effort to preserve the independent track. It need not be as many numbers as the integrated track, but I think we need to preserve it to some extent, like maybe at least one third of the positions should go to independent. It was around 10 years ago that they were about even, and now they've dropped. I think it's like 55 independent and 85 integrated is where I last saw it. But the problem becomes people anticipating a career in plastic surgery, and they choose to want a broad education like yourself. They then will have to face the concept of, say, they want to go to Penn. Even Penn, I know, is looking to change their training process. So just because they want to go to Penn, it might be taken away from them, and they don't know that at the time of entry into their training program. So I think we're doing a disservice to people by completely taking away these. So my personal feeling is, for the good of plastic surgery, all programs should have one third of their spots in independent. And that would be a good ratio so that we don't lose that type of candidate. I know I don't I know we're not going to accomplish that. People are going to do what they feel they want to do, but I will certainly push when I'm at AAPS and other places to preserve the independent program.
Hmm. And what do you think about competency-based training, like or the best way of training for the future?
Yeah, I think that that's the wave of training in the future. There's been so much. When I was on the ACGME, that was really a major part of what we did, and then Bob Weber and was a champion of that, who was on the ACGME with me, and we then began this trial program of Michigan, Johns Hopkins, Temple,
Mhm.
and University of Pittsburgh, and that's sort of in the final phase, and some of them have dropped out. But the concept, I think, is going to be that will become more and more the norm. Whether it changes the length of training is a question, because a smaller program won't have the administrative ability to drop someone out and fill a position. If they were counting on someone being there for 6 years. So that the administrative component is something that'll be difficult to understand, but the responsibility is giving to the resident, then it increases their flexibility. So someone who is felt to be competent after 5 years can do more of a focused sixth year. So I think it'll be to the good of plastic surgery to go competency based,
Hmm.
realizing that it might not. allow them to be out of that institution earlier, but it will allow them to take advantage of more specialized focus areas if they choose to do so.
Mm.
And those are what we would call inbred fellowships that a lot of, and that I think is gaining
Yep.
more traction as well.
Yeah. So you've accomplished so much already. Um, and we could talk for hours about everything that you've been involved in and how you've progressed plastic surgery and are great and a giant in plastic surgery. But are there any moments that you would consider regrets or things you would change, or that you would give as advice to, someone upcoming to, learn from?
Yeah, well, there's so many things we can learn from our mistakes, but I think that the biggest mistake we all make is to become too focused in our specialty. So for example, someone will take a lot of pride in continuing to progress in leadership and say, "Great, I was the president of the American Society of Craniofacial Surgeons." But what good does who really cares that someone in microsurgery really doesn't care who the president of the ACFS was? Someone in general surgery doesn't care, and the American College probably never heard of you. So the we get so engrossed in our smaller units and don't realize that we're not really impacting
Yes.
medicine. And in so doing, we may not, with that narrow focus, we may not realize that we're being encroached upon by so many other areas that are broader focus. Like you can be the president of the ASCFS, but if you have a 10 ENT surgeons for every plastic surgeon, it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference because the cases are going to change based on the numbers of providers. So remember, the medicine is driven not by prestige, but medicine is driven by economics and providers. So that's why we've lost so much maxillofacial trauma because plastic surgeons feel so elite and they often
Yes.
Yeah.
for facial trauma in the middle of the night when they're in private practice. So oral surgeons and even general surgeons
Hmm.
take that over time. Anyone can learn a skill if they're asked to do it repetitively. So I think that we have to realize that we like to think of ourselves as elite and we are elite, but we have to understand the broader house of surgery. And I think that's a problem we all have. Like when I finished my training, I said, okay, I finished my plastic surgery training. Let me become as competent as I could. So I did the hand and microsurgery fellowship, then the craniofacial fellowship. And then the more you get into a certain type of practice and the more involved those cases are, the less you can really see that forest through its trees because you're in the operating room the whole time, just not really seeing how medicine is organized. So I don't mean to take any credit away from the great clinicians, but we do need a number of people who can be a little less clinically involved so that we can see the forest through the trees, and that's through organized medicine, I think. And that's where we have to really say what is the ASCFS going to do to impact plastic surgery. And so something like what you're doing to say, let's get all of these leaders together. I think we have to go beyond that and ask those leaders to say, how can I take that leadership to a broader society, whether it be ASPS? And once you've done that, how can I take that to a broader society and really impact surgery? And that's really the ACS. And that's really the road that I have tried to take and hopefully can continue in the final parts of my career.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
obviously on a smaller scale, that was like one of the impetuses for this podcast is to bring all these greats from different specialties together so we can all, learn from each other and collaborate because that's obviously ultimately where plastic surgery comes from is, there's no territory. It's all your territory. So it's kind of a double-edged sword between becoming like a master of none and jack of all trades versus trying to be the best at one certain thing. So we definitely need all of it. It's like a spectrum. So I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you go as if for example to go to the American College of Surgeons, you can if you tell them this is all our territory, you'll have
Yeah.
very little traction. So we need to always tell them that we can contribute in this way, we'll work with you in this way, and we have to unless we really are on at the table for each thing. So if they put out a breast course and they're going to say general surgery putting out a breast reconstruction course, we need to be at the table and say these are skill sets that we may be able to provide in a more sophisticated fashion. So we can't let these things go beyond us. So that's why I think the American College becomes so important. And then also to represent what we do in plastic surgery in the larger scale. When we go to the to the legislative arm of either the state or the federal government, they are less likely to listen to a plastic surgeon because they think of a plastic surgeons as a cosmetic surgeons driving Ferraris and that type of thing. And you come to them and ask for money for your patients, they really don't care
Yes.
what they. What they need to know is that does the House of Surgery support this? Is this an isolated request, or is it something that the House of Surgery is requesting? And I think we can really leverage advocacy through the American College of Surgeons.
Yeah, I think one of the best parts that I've taken away from this podcast is how much you love your society involvement in order to make effective change and to make good change and see our society as a whole get better. And to be involved in the American College of Surgeons, the association, PSRC, AAPS, all these different organizations. What advice do you have for others to who want to have that same influence and really are working hard to try to be as involved as you were at one point? What did you do to get so involved in all of these societies?
Well, I think a lot of it is mentorship. I remember when I started in my as a young faculty member, Dr. Larson, who was my chair, he said, Arun, what societies are you, what meetings are you going to go to? And I said the PSRC and the association. And he said, good, keep it that way and don't give up. And, stay that the rest of your career. And so that was probably the best advice anyone gave me. Is to take one or two key organizations and really focus on what they can contribute and how you can contribute to them. And so certainly the PSR, so I've become president of both of those over my career, but it's because of that focus that I've had. And then as you get to as people realize that you can, if you truly are doing something of value in those organizations, they'll realize that perhaps your value to other organizations will be of value. So the ASMS will say, okay, this might be someone we would like to promote, and then the ASPS may see the same, and it really is a dominoes effect, but really taking a few major societies, focusing on them, not saying I'm going to go to every single meeting in every single society just because I want to be involved or their leader, but through that and through your reputation, those societies, see if other societies feel like you can contribute to them. That would be my suggestion, rather than seeking just roles in every
Mhm.
single society.
Yeah, that's helpful to know when again you feel like you try to want to be so involved in so many different things, but it's nice to focus a little bit. And one thing that we ask a lot of our guests is several fun questions, just because again we're interviewing leaders in the field, other influential people who are inspirational to so many. But one thing that I'm always interested is what hobbies do you have outside of what you do, and when do you find time for that? Like, how much do you sleep, etc.?
Well, as you probably know, I was a wrestler all through high school and college, and
Yeah.
so sports has always been a part of what I do. I never I don't continue to participate in wrestling, but
Yeah, you can. Can
yeah.
you? I don't know. Do people still participate in wrestling?
Well, they have clubs and all that, but I don't do that so
Oh,
much. But just remaining physically active is important. So I try to every day spend an hour to an hour and a half in in the gym or doing some type of thing. And that's really the only thing I can do outside of clinical medicine and research is that. But it also keeps your energy level up. So,
yes.
whatever it is, whether it's playing tennis or going gym or something where you can keep your energy level up and not get bogged down as a value. And I saw one of the questions is how much you sleep. I'd like to. I was thinking about that, and we always say, okay, we really envy this person. He only sleeps 3 hours a day, and look how much he gets done. But but
Exactly.
but if we ask the real question is what happened to that person by the time he was 80, the odds are he might have died from a heart attack. So my counsel to the young people who might be listening to this don't emulate things just because it sounds attractive at this stage in your life, but look at your long-term goals and your long-term health to be able to establish the goals. If you don't have health, you're not going to be able to establish any goals. So certainly if something requires that you only sleep 3 hours that night and you need to meet a deadline or you're on call, whatever, then certainly meet that deadline and fulfill your obligations. But if you don't have to do that, it's much better to have 20 or to have 18 hours of efficient use of your time
Yes.
rather than 22 hours of inefficient use of your time. So that would be my recommendation to anyone who asks about sleeping hours is try to figure out what sleep pattern will allow you to be most efficient and not fall asleep during lab meetings. And that would be much more important than saying I slept only 3 hours. And then the last thing is think about, if you're going to keep doing this as long as I've been doing it, think about your cardiovascular health. I think that sleeping for short hours on a regular basis can be detrimental to your cardiovascular health.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Thank you again so much for taking the time to join us. We just have a couple more questions. And what music do you listen to in the OR?
Yeah, so what do you think from looking at my generation? What's the greatest group of all time?
Beatles.
Beatles.
No question.
Who said that? Oh, you know who said it? Fuad Nahai. Was it Fuad Nahai that
Yeah,
just
he said that too.
Yeah.
yeah.
So no questions. The Beatles to rock and roll are like Mozart is to classical music. So certainly everything comes out of it. And then the generation that was impacted by the Beatles with Tom Petty and George Harrison went on to form the Traveling Wilburys with Tom Petty and Bob Dylan, and those people, those are the greats of our time. And certainly that's what I tend to listen to.
That's awesome. And then what's your favorite surgical instrument?
It, I would probably say it's hard to say any good instrument. Dr. McCarthy would say the same thing when he would pick up any instrument. He said, "You can tell this one was made in Germany." So anything that's made well and precise, I enjoy working with.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. We know how busy you are clearly by everything we just talked about. And again, the sole purpose of this is nothing more than just help inspire others and so that you can share. We have so many fruitful conversations between all of us, but it's nice to record them every once in a while and have the audience listen. I know I learned a lot from tonight, and it's again, it's just a source of inspiration to all of us.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for taking the time. And I know that well, I don't know you as well, Hank, but I know Saeed from he's going to be a well, he's already a leader, but will
No, I'm
continue
not.
continue to develop into that. And you have a great mentor in Saeed.
I
Thank you.
appreciate that.
No,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys, and have a good evening.
thank
Thank
you.
you. You too. Thanks for
Yes,
joining.
yes.